Leonhard Euler, German Standard German, L, was a Swiss mathematician, physicist, astronomer, logician and engineer who made important and influential discoveries in many branches of mathematics like infinitesimal calculus and graph theory, while also making pioneering contributions to several branches such as topology and analytic number theory. He also introduced much of the modern mathematical terminology and notation, particularly for mathematical analysis, such as the notion of a mathematical function. He is also known for his work in mechanics, fluid dynamics, optics, astronomy, and music theory. Euler was one of the most eminent mathematicians of the 18th century, and is held to be one of the greatest in history. He is also widely considered to be the most prolific mathematician of all times. His collected works fill 60 to 80 quarto volumes, more than anybody in the field. He spent most of his adult life in St. Petersburg, Russia, and in Berlin, then the capital of Prussia. A statement attributed to Pierre-Simon Laplace expresses Euler's influence on mathematics. Read Euler, he is the master of us all. Life. Early years. Leonhard Euler was born on the 15th of April 1707, in Basel, Switzerland to Paul Euler, a pastor of the Reformed Church, and Marguerite Nieacute Brucker, a pastor's daughter. He had two younger sisters, Anna Maria and Maria Magdalena. Soon after the birth of Leonhard, the Eulers moved from Basel to the town of Riehen, where Euler spent most of his childhood. Paul Euler was a friend of the Bernoulli family. Johann Bernoulli was then regarded as Europe's foremost mathematician, and would eventually be the most important influence on young Leonhard. Euler's formal education started in Basel, where he was sent to live with his maternal grandmother. In 1720, aged 13, he enrolled at the University of Basel, and in 1723, he received a Master of Philosophy with a dissertation that compared the philosophies of Descartes and Newton. At that time, he was receiving Saturday afternoon lessons from Johann Bernoulli, who quickly discovered his new pupil's incredible talent for mathematics. At that time Euler's main studies included theology, Greek, and Hebrew at his father's urging, in order to become a pastor. But Bernoulli convinced his father that Leonhard was destined to become a great mathematician. In 1726, Euler completed a dissertation on the propagation of sound with the title De Sono. At that time, he was unsuccessfully attempting to obtain a position at the University of Basel. In 1727, he first entered the Paris Academy Prize problem competition. The problem that year was to find the best way to place the masts on a ship. Pierre Bouguer, who became known as the father of naval architecture, won and Euler took second place. Euler later won this annual prize 12 times. St. Petersburg. Around this time Johann Bernoulli's two sons, Daniel and Nicholas, were working at the Imperial Russian Academy of Sciences in St. Petersburg. On 10 July 1726, Nicholas died of appendicitis after spending a year in Russia, and when Daniel assumed his brother's position in the mathematics-physics division, he recommended that the post in physiology that he had vacated be filled by his friend Euler. In November 1726 Euler eagerly accepted the offer, but delayed making the trip to St. Petersburg while he unsuccessfully applied for a physics professorship at the University of Basel. Euler arrived in St. Petersburg on 17 May 1727. He was promoted from his junior post in the medical department of the academy to a position in the mathematics department. He lodged with Daniel Bernoulli, with whom he often worked in close collaboration. Euler mastered Russian and settled into life in St. Petersburg. He also took on an additional job as a medic in the Russian Navy. The academy at St. Petersburg, established by Peter the Great, was intended to improve education in Russia and to close the scientific gap with Western Europe. As a result, it was made especially attractive to foreign scholars like Euler. The Academy possessed ample financial resources and a comprehensive library drawn from the private libraries of Peter himself and of the nobility. Very few students were enrolled in the Academy in order to lessen the faculty's teaching burden, and the Academy emphasized research and offered to its faculty both the time and the freedom to pursue scientific questions. The Academy's benefactress, Catherine I, who had continued the progressive policies of her late husband, died on the day of Euler's arrival. The Russian nobility then gained power upon the ascension of the 12-year-old Peter II. The nobility were suspicious of the Academy's foreign scientists, and thus cut funding and caused other difficulties for Euler and his colleagues. Conditions improved slightly after the death of Peter II, and Euler swiftly rose through the ranks in the Academy and was made professor of physics in 1731. 2 years later, Daniel Bernoulli, who was fed up with the censorship and hostility he faced at St. Petersburg, left for Basel. Euler succeeded him as the head of the mathematics department. On 7 January 1734, he married Katharina Gesell, a daughter of Georg Gesell, a painter from the Academy Gymnasium. The young couple bought a house by the Neva River. Of their 13 children, only 5 survived childhood. Berlin concerned about the continuing turmoil in Russia, Euler left St. Petersburg on 19 June 1741 to take up a post at the Berlin Academy, which he had been offered by Frederick the Great of Prussia. He lived for 25 years in Berlin, where he wrote over 380 articles. In Berlin, he published the 2 works for which he would become most renowned: the Introductio in Analysa Infinitorum, a text on functions published in 1748, and the Institutiones Calculi Differentialis, published in 1755 on differential calculus. In 1755, he was elected a foreign member of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. In addition, Euler was asked to tutor Friederike Charlotte of Brandenburg-Schwedt, the Princess of Anhalt-Dessau and Friedrich's niece. Euler wrote over 200 letters to her in the early 1760s, which were later compiled into a best-selling volume entitled Letters of Euler on Different Subjects in Natural Philosophy, addressed to a German princess. This work contained Euler's exposition on various subjects pertaining to physics and mathematics, as well as offering valuable insights into Euler's personality and religious beliefs. This book became more widely read than any of his mathematical works, and was published across Europe and in the United States. The popularity of the letters testifies to Euler's ability to communicate scientific matters effectively to a lay audience, a rare ability for a dedicated research scientist. Despite Euler's immense contribution to the Academy's prestige, he eventually incurred the ire of Frederick and ended up having to leave Berlin. The Prussian king had a large circle of intellectuals in his court, and he found the mathematician unsophisticated and ill-informed on matters beyond numbers and figures. Euler was a simple, devoutly religious man who never questioned the existing social order or conventional beliefs. In many ways the polar opposite of Voltaire, who enjoyed a high place of prestige at Friedrich's court. Euler was not a skilled debater and often made it a point to argue subjects that he knew little about, making him the frequent target of Voltaire's wit. Frederick also expressed disappointment with Euler's practical engineering abilities. "I wanted to have a water jet in my garden." Euler calculated the force of the wheels necessary to raise the water to a reservoir, from where it should fall back through channels, finally spurting out in Sans Souci. "My mill was carried out geometrically and could not raise a mouthful of water closer than 50 paces to the reservoir." Vanity of vanities. Vanity of geometry. Eyesight deterioration. Euler's eyesight worsened throughout his mathematical career. In 1738, 3 years after nearly expiring from fever, he became almost blind in his right eye. But Euler rather blamed the painstaking work on cartography he performed for the St. Petersburg Academy for his condition. Euler's vision in that worsened throughout his stay in Germany, to the extent that Frederick referred to him as Cyclops. Euler later developed a cataract in his left eye, which was discovered in 1766. Just a few weeks after its discovery, he was rendered almost totally blind. However, his condition appeared to have little effect on his productivity, as he compensated for it with his mental calculation skills and exceptional memory. For example, Euler could repeat the Aeneid of Virgil from beginning to end without hesitation, and for every page in the edition he could indicate which line was the first and which the last. With the aid of his scribes, Euler's productivity on many areas of study actually increased. He produced on average one mathematical paper every week in the year 1775. Returned to Russia and death in 1760. With the 7 Years' War raging, Euler's farm in Charlottenburg was ransacked by advancing Russian troops. Upon learning of this event, General Ivan Petrovich Saltykov paid compensation for the damage caused to Euler's estate. Later Empress Elizabeth of Russia added a further payment of 4,000 rubles, an exorbitant amount at the time. The political situation in Russia stabilized after Catherine the Great's succession to the throne. So in 1766 Euler accepted an invitation to return to the St. Petersburg Academy. All of these requests were granted. He spent the rest of his life in Russia. However, his second stay in the country was marred by tragedy. A fire in St. Petersburg in 1771 cost him his home, and almost his life. In 1773, he lost his wife Katharina after 40 years of marriage. 3 years after his wife's death, Euler married her half-sister, Salome Abigail Gesell. This marriage lasted until his death. In 1782 he was elected a foreign honorary member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. In St. Petersburg on 18 September 1783, after a lunch with his family, Euler was discussing the newly discovered planet Uranus and its orbit with a fellow academician Anders Johann Lexell, when he collapsed from a brain hemorrhage. He died a few hours later. Jacob von Stahlin-Stalksberg wrote a short obituary for the Russian Academy of Sciences, and Russian mathematician Nicholas Fuss, one of Euler's disciples, wrote a more detailed eulogy which he delivered at a memorial meeting. In his eulogy for the French Academy, French mathematician and philosopher Marquis de Condorcet wrote, "Il cessa de calculer et de vivre." He ceased to calculate and to live. Euler was buried next to Katharina at the Smolensk Lutheran Cemetery on Vasilyevsky Island. In 1785, the Russian Academy of Sciences put a marble bust of Leonhard Euler on a pedestal next to the director's seat and, in 1837, placed a headstone on Euler's grave. To commemorate the 250th anniversary of Euler's birth, the headstone was moved in 1956, together with his remains, to the 18th-century necropolis at the Alexander Nevsky Monastery.